Well, welcome back, my good friends. I'm ever so glad to see you back here with me today, my friends, where we are re-establishing the Thromboian dominance on the planet of Degum, and reasserting ourselves as the leaders and the #1 faction. Or at least that's the long-term plan. It is going to be quite a while before we get to that long-term goal, and we still have a lot of work to do before we get anywhere near that. So at the moment, we are currently doing plenty of construction around our city, including, but not limited to, improving our road system with some proper limestone bricks to make sure we have an ease of access and proper mobility throughout the city. Once that was finally completed, I noticed that we had our torches on the outside lighting up our city, going out, of course, because of the rain. Now, last episode, we began actually taking and producing power from the Mother Degum herself by using her beautiful rushing waters in the river, and of course, since we do have some electricity, it only makes sense that we would use that to also power some lights. I know, hardly a tribal dictator if we're using electricity, but again, we're only going to be using it for the essentials, such as being able to see, of course. Not to worry, we're not going to stray too far from our roots in our ancestry, but as previously mentioned, our long-term goal of becoming an absolute powerhouse, a force to be reckoned with, is probably going to require us to upgrade a little bit in technology. Nevertheless, though, before we go about doing all that, we are currently having some power issues, and thus because of that, we're going to be building ourselves yet another water mill to generate even more power. Ah, yes, there we are, a nice, bright city. We can see for miles all around our outer barricades. Now, with these lights, there's about a snowball's chance in hell of those filthy Confederacy tribal warriors, or the Republic of Libertas rebels coming up on us in the dead of night without us knowing about it. Speaking of which, those filthy humans continue to pollute this beautiful planet with their spaceship chunks and all their space programs that they seem to be running, and they just dump all the trash wherever they want. But luckily for us, we know how to refurbish these materials into the things that we need. Using the steel and electronic components from their starship chunks and their booster debris, we would be able to make ourselves a battery bank within the city, allowing us to charge up these batteries, and that way, if for some reason the river is going to be dry in the summer seasons or something like that, we'll still have plenty of power. We could also build ourselves a proper radio tower along with a terminal, allowing us to communicate with our soldiers in the field, as well as our other settlements that we've set up in towns and villages, as well as the main Thromboian Union government, but also that way we can start communicating with other factions like the Marshal Service and setting up some proper trade routes. Being a warlord isn't just all about killing your enemies and conquering new lands. That's only about 3/4 of the time. Sometimes you have to sit down and start filing some paperwork and looking over trade routes to make some money. Because continuing to make money is the only way that we can continue our expansion and our push of our borders towards the Confederacy of Binya's territory. Thankfully, though, the trade isn't just up to us here in the capital city at Ancestors Landing. No, we are also doing plenty of trading of lumber and other natural resources with all of these new villages and settlements that we're building as well, as you well know, I'm sure. Speaking of which, it looks like this season we're going to have quite a few yields of cloth from our fields, as well as plenty of stone artworks to go about selling. As you might imagine, the art and everything that we've been creating, though, is quite heavy, and thus we need some pack animals, so we went out and began trying to tame a few horses, which we are somewhat being successful at. At some point, we would like to probably get some more vehicles that are actually land-based instead of our canoes, but we're going to have to purchase some blueprints and also some components for that. One evening, the disgusting humans, who just so happened to be our allies by happenstance from the Marshal settlements, had come to do a little bit of trading with us. And yes, as much as we loathe the humans, for now it's best for us to stay in their good graces until we own this region. Besides, it seems like they might have some weapons for us. But trailing not too far behind them was a raid from the Confederacy of Binya, and with them were several attack hounds. As the humans approached and began telling us what what they saw out there, we quickly rushed to our defenses and barricades around the bridge. The Confederacy tribespeople began attacking our civilian traders. Their mechanical and robotic companions began to assist them and us, strangely enough, with taking out these bastards. We found this gesture to be quite odd, but we began to think that they were simply trying to protect their humanoid masters is all. Nevertheless, we would use this to our advantage. If these robots want to help us take out our enemies, we'll gladly let them. But as the Confederacy hounds began coming across the bridge, we began to make a strategic retreat back into the city, where we were startled by the fact that the martial police force and even the civilians were coming to our aid, putting their lives on the line not only for themselves, but for us as well. Thromboian and human standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting side by side. Maybe the marshals aren't so bad after all. With the assistance of our allies, we would manage to push the Confederacy out of our territory and out of our city, finally winning this battle for us and defeating the Confederacy once and for all. For now, at least. I wonder perhaps, have we been a little bit too harsh on our human allies? Maybe they're going to be much more useful than we give them credit for. Sure, their government hates Thromboians, but that also means that they hate the Confederacy. They could be a crucial part of helping us defeat them, as well as toppling the Thromboian Union itself, bringing the power to us. Only time shall tell, I suppose, but something tells me they probably wouldn't mind funding a civil war for a race of people that they hate. Speaking of war, I think we've put plenty of focus into Ancestors Landing, our capital city, in this episode thus far, and I think it's time for a little bit of conquering. I'm sure you all remember Abner from our first episode. She was one of the 3 members, along with Wolf, who had actually founded this city and this great movement, and thus why she is one of Wolf's most trusted friends as well as a soldier. But I think that it's time that we gave her a promotion to a chieftain, letting her run her very own raid against the Confederacy of Banya. Riding off on one of our new stallions on this rainy eve, she is single-handedly going to be making her way into the Confederacy's territory, and we are going to be claiming it for ourselves. Naturally, the journey shall take quite some time, so we'll check back in on her progress later. Besides, back home, we do still have quite a bit of work to do, not only on the city realistically, but just in our new civilization and our defenses, and that's why we're performing a bit of research on scrap metal workings, which will end up unlocking quite a few scrap weapons for us, such as a scrap turret, a very basic and the beginning of what is automated turrets. Our trusted fellow Quinn shall get right to work on that, and once he is completed, we'll be able to start building some of these. But in the meantime, we also noticed that all of our taxes that are being brought in from our nearby settlements are just kind of lying out on the ground. To be honest with you, I suppose we hadn't expected our movement and our new faction and group that we're creating to grow so fast. Thus, we really have nowhere to put all this. Naturally, though, of course, the only rational thing that we could do was to build some type of bank. Although this isn't actually a bank, this is going to be our tribal treasury for our entire faction. Any jade, gold, or especially silver is going to be landing on these shelves at some point and is going to be funding our uprising as well as our entire movement. Thus why we needed somewhere more secure, of course. It would seem, though, that Abner has finally arrived at a Confederacy settlement, and it's time that we get this party started. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. How on God's green daggum are we going to go about taking out all of these Confederacy soldiers who seem to be just as well armed as we are, with simply one Abner? Well, my friends, Abner is not alone, not by a long shot. Reinforcements had already arrived from every corner around this region. Each and every one of our settlements were pouring in resources and soldiers to help us take on the Confederacy. Blood was about to be spilled, and a lot of it. As a branch of the main Union faction, we've always had an opportunity to have better armor than the Confederacy, but it won't do us any good when we're completely outnumbered 2-1. But the difference, the thing that gave us an edge and an advantage against them in this battle is we weren't here trying to take their little village. No, we were going to burn it to the ground. They had everything to lose, and we had nothing but our lives to give. Abner, sitting high atop her stallion, would continue giving orders to the soldiers, and we would actually begin pushing them out of their very own village. It did help us out quite a bit that our soldiers had already began setting fire to many of their food storage buildings and some of their homes as well. Wars are not won with chivalry and respect. They're won by fighting dirty. With the Confederacy fleeing the area, we would actually begin tending to our wounded to try and ensure that we could conserve as much life as possible. As for our enemies, we could have taken them hostage and maybe attempted to rehabilitate them or even to enslave them, but we wanted to send a message with this village, so we decided to finish them off. Not to worry though, as we had found some of the Confederacy's own slaves, one of them even being a Thromboian from the Union who had been enslaved, as well as a human from the Republic of Libertas. Nevertheless, we'll take them both back home. And with that, my friends, we have yet another glorious victory under our belt. Though we may have had many a casualty, we still won at the end of the day. Progress is progress, and we're heading in the right direction. I'm sure Wolf will be pleased. Abner, along with the two enslaved folks, began making their way all the way home. In the meantime, it would seem that our other settlements were also having a good bit of luck taking over some more of the Confederacy's territory, getting our foot further and further into the door of this region. Meanwhile, back at the capital, we had also finally finished up our tribal treasury, and we're just now getting all of our riches moved over and stored in there for the time. We also finally finished up our extensive research into scrap workings, now allowing us to go about building some proper scrap turrets. As mentioned, these turrets are extremely basic and, to be honest with you, are just a pretty poor copy of human designs of automated turrets, but we wanted to try to do something semi-unique, though they be pretty bare bones. I don't think they're really sticking with our tribal heritage, but pretty close, kinda. Late one evening, Abner, as well as our new slave companions, had finally arrived into the region. Immediately, we took them into our prison, and we plan on rehabilitating Ben here, our Union soldier, who's essentially been brainwashed by the Confederacy Thromboians. As for our human rebel from Libertas, we decided that we would enslave her. Sorry, lady, we still believe in a Thromboian racial purity, I'm afraid. Now then, I know earlier I said that I think we've worked on our capital city enough this episode and we need to start conquering. Well, there is a little bit of time here where we need to try to let our forces recoup and regroup and prepare for yet another battle. So during this time, we're actually going to be working on the city, and to do so, we're deconstructing some of our defenses here in the southern section of the capital, and we're actually going to be building ourselves a proper storage area. Up until this point, we've still been storing all of our resources and what have you, for the most part, inside of our little citadel area, but no more of that. Now, we are going to be keeping all of our weapons that we currently have in the citadel storage room, what used to be the storage room for all of our resources, and it is going to be functioning as something of a makeshift armory. We may end up leaving it as that, but we'll see. Now, last episode, I did ask you wonderful folks for some suggestions for what we should be calling the main building here within our capital city, as the Citadel is a term that the humans used a long time ago in the S&R Rifle Company, and we don't want any confusion, and of course we want our own term, so we have a great suggestion by our friend Civ Lover 10, who suggests that we call it the Ancestors' Spire, perhaps just the Spire for short, of course, and we could even imagine that there is a great marble thrombo horn atop this little building, and I like the sounds of that, I really do, and I think that's awesome and badass. So that's exactly what we're going to be calling it, and there is indeed a great big marble horn atop it. Funny enough though, we ended up having Quinn, who was flirting with Abner, and the two of them have apparently become infatuated with each other and are now lovers. Ah yes, just a couple of kooky kiddos in love, and as they say, all's fair in love and war. Does that apply here? I think it does. The next project in the city that we decided to tackle was a few more fields to go about growing some rice and cabbage and things like that to feed our growing population, but we would also end up making a smaller field full of hay grass to feed our growing horse population. By this point as well, we were financially, well endowed, I suppose you could say, but we plan on reinvesting all of this money back into our growing settlements. And obviously, what I mean by this is going through and building plenty of logging camps and tree farms and things like that we can use for further trade and to make more money, and also we're going through and upgrading these settlements, reinvesting the money back in so they can grow larger and they can also support larger militaries, which is absolutely crucial. After all that reinvesting though, as you might imagine, we are flat broke, at least until the next round of taxes comes in, though I must say it was well worth it, as all our spending really helped with our military efforts as well, gaining more territory and taking more territory from the Confederacy. Meanwhile, back home at the capital, we're also working on some more efficient defenses, some proper walls that are going to be surrounding the city, keeping us safe and sound. You'll also notice we're putting some barbed wire out on the road as well, that way we can monitor who's coming in and out of the city, and we also have some embrasures in case things get a little bit hairy. This new stretch of wall is going to be cutting through the mountains all the way down to the river, completely cutting off any route other than the road leading into the city in the southern part of the region. But don't look now, friends, as we have quite the dastardly little group of rebels coming from Libertas looking to try to kill us. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that this very well may be our first raid from the Republic of Libertas. It would seem that they're finally getting knowledge of our large city that we're building here and the forces of our branch. I suppose we should be flattered. Well, we may be flattered, but we're not exactly grateful for the gigantic artillery that they're packing in their hands that they plan on blasting us in the face with. Though the rebels definitely have a technological advantage with the weapons that they're carrying, as well as their armor, we have the advantage of numbers. A good example of this is when we were distracting this same rebel while Abinur had snuck up from behind and Wolf finally put the nail in the coffin for her. But in killing her, we would also have access to her large machine gun, which would be perfect for finishing off her remaining friends. The rebels would attempt to hide in some nearby rock formations just outside the city, firing at us blindly, it seemed. Naturally, our soldiers were returning fire, giving us an ample opportunity to creep up around the exact same rocks when they wouldn't expect it. And after taking out her compadres, the last remaining rebel would also fall to our might. You poor, dumb creature, have you fallen this far from the truth? We shall help your eyes see the light of your ancestors once more. And as for your friends, we won't kill them. Well, at least not for right now. But we will be stripping them of all their gear and weapons and taking them to our prison to be enslaved. They are human after all. Though much of this gear is most likely better than what we're currently using with our more traditional armor and what have you, we don't plan on wearing it. We need to form our own different types of uniforms and armors to set us apart not only from our enemies but also from the main government of the Thromboian Union once we're ready for that, of course. Until then, perhaps we could sell this. Their weapons, on the other hand, though, oh mama, we were more than tickled to use those immediately. But after our epic battle, we must get back to the more bureaucratic things like setting up more trade missions and routes throughout our settlements, as well as instructing our soldiers a little bit. You don't get results like these just by blindly firing into villages. No, this takes strategy. But strategies don't win wars, or at least not just strategies, of course. Soldiers are also a very crucial part, and so is their food, their training, and most importantly perhaps, their equipment. And that's exactly why we're going to be utilizing a lot of our tax money right now to reinvest in some better equipment for more of our soldiers. Not to worry though, more taxes shall flow in, helping us replenish our treasury, along with much more trade with our human partners. But with such good relations, perhaps we could rely on them in a military fashion in the future. We'll see. Late one evening, though, we would actually end up having a group of bounty hunters from our parental government stopping in the area. This wasn't a big deal, and obviously we don't mind, but I wanted to mention it because even our parent government, the Union, of course, as I've said many times over and over in the videos and the last video, they actually have some pretty good equipment, better than we do. But of course, they don't just give this out willy-nilly to any of the additional accessory tribes and branches like ourselves. And this is going to make things quite difficult when we inevitably attempt to overthrow them. But we will fight tooth and nail for our dream. A dream that we've had, that we will once again be the dominant race on the planet of Degum, and that one day everyone shall bow before our ancestral spire. And until that is achieved, we'll continue working towards it. For example, we are expanding the city yet again. This time around, we're actually going to be building some more residential housing, along with something of a workshop where we hope to begin making some types of forged weapons, axes, swords, whatever we need, as well as maybe some guns, our own brand of firearm. At one point, we ended up having a very well-skilled armorer in one of our nearby settlements asking us for some monetary funding so that they could create a very specialized set of armor for us. So, of course, we would spare no expense, and we gave them a pretty lump sum of silver. I'm sure this type of armor is going to take a long time, though, so in the meantime, we'll also take a look at all of the new Confederacy territories and villages that we're taking over. And I don't just mean look at as in the map, no, I'm going to take you down to the ground level. We're going to see what's really going on. I think that sums it up pretty well. You get the gist, right? We're not playing games. Though I must say, the enhanced trade relations with the Marshal Service has been a very crucial part, as we had previously mentioned it most likely would be, to our great successful conquering of these territories, essentially. After quite a few more days, we would eventually take every single settlement from the Confederacy on the mainland, forcing their remaining forces to retreat to a small island just off the coast of the continent, with only 2 more villages, cities, and/or towns remaining. I feel it's safe to say that the Confederacy has essentially been eliminated by this point. They are a shell of what they previously were, and as we look over the continent, you'll notice that we own a vast majority of this territory now, rivaling that of even the Thromboian Union. I think it's finally time, my friends. It's time that we abandon the pitiful and pathetic Union that has failed us around every corner, and we become our own nation. No longer part of the Union, we shall be known as the Federation of Thromboian Territories. The Federation for short. It's time that we finally achieved our goals and dreams. Well, word sure does travel fast. That's to be expected, I suppose. I'll see you next time.